Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Today channel. Nick's emotional proposal to Brooke, causing Ridge and Eric to fight. Nick makes a suggestion to Brooke. Brooke and Nick were on a boat cruise when she nearly went overboard. Fortunately, however, Ridge was there to save his Logan. Brooke is considering her future after her near-death experience and will need to make a crucial choice. Nick got a surprise when he visits Forrester Creations to see how she is doing. Because he loves Brooke, Nick assures her that their relationship isn't over while removing a ring. Have Brooke's feelings altered since she was prepared to ride off into the sunset with Nick in Italy? After Brooke nearly drowned, Ridge's affection for her was rekindled. However, Ridge's engagement to Taylor is a barrier preventing Bridge from getting back together. Ridge updates Taylor on the events in Italy this week. As the topic of Brooke's romantic life comes up, Taylor states that Brooke won't have Ridge in her future. Taylor goes on to say that she will not remove her ring. Nick's ambush proposal. Nick Marone's suggestion ambush. It is anticipated by fans that Nick will arrive at Forrester Creations holding a ring box. In the weekly preview footage, Brooke appears completely taken aback. When Nick proposes that they get married, her mouth falls open. It's clear that the seaman's idea to do it on the boat didn't work out properly. But now that Ridge Forrester has been saved and Brooke has had a near-death experience, things are changed. I don't think Brooke would encourage Nick by getting married to him. She is aware that none of them would be treated fairly. Notifying Taylor Hayes. They have a serious conversation over with Ridge. Ridge will attempt to explain the events in Italy to Taylor Hayes. Taylor won't accept that things have changed, even if she will be glad that Brooke is alright. Taylor won't remove the ring from her finger while Ridge droops his head in surrender. Additionally, she says that Brooke has a future, it simply isn't with Ridge. Brooke Logan like a tuning fork struck hard, resonating through every nerve ending long after Ridge Forrester's strong arms had hauled her, gasping and trembling, back onto the deck of the boat, back into the precarious light of the living. That brush with oblivion, that stark confrontation with mortality during what should have been a simple boat ride with Nick Marone, had fundamentally altered Brooke's internal landscape. It wasn't just seawater she'd shed upon returning to solid ground, but layers of complacency, assumptions about time stretching endlessly before her, and perhaps, illusions about the path her heart was truly set upon. In the profound quiet that follows a near-death experience, a terrifying clarity often emerges, forcing one to sift through the rubble of their life and identify what is truly essential, what love is worth weathering any storm for, and what future glimmers with authentic promise rather than comfortable illusion. Brooke found herself adrift in this introspective sea, replaying the terrifying plunge, the sheer animal instinct to survive, and then, piercing through the watery darkness, Ridge, the architect of her greatest joys and most shattering sorrows, the magnetic pull her soul had always inexplicably oriented towards, diving in without a second thought, his sole focus her rescue, his strength her lifeline, his presence in that moment of ultimate vulnerability a revelation that reignited ancient embers she'd believed banked or extinguished by time and circumstance. His whispered reassurance, "I've got you, Logan," as he held her shaking form on the deck, wasn't just comfort. It was a seismic tremor shifting the tectonic plates of her carefully constructed world with Nick. The planned idyll in Italy, the sun-drenched fantasy of riding off into the Tuscan sunset with steadfast, devoted Nick, suddenly seemed like a beautiful painting viewed from a great distance, lovely, serene, but lacking the visceral, electric charge, the profound, messy, undeniable history and connection that surged between her and Ridge in that life-or-death moment. Yet, Ridge remained an impossible constellation, burning brightly but separated from her by the vast, uncrossable gulf of his engagement to Taylor Hayes, the woman who represented stability, healing, and a future unburdened by the tumultuous Logan Forrester saga, a commitment Ridge had made publicly and, Brooke had believed, irrevocably. This agonizing dichotomy, the reawakened, primal pull towards Ridge warring with the deep affection, gratitude, and promise of peace she felt with Nick, was the crucible in which Brooke now found herself, her future hanging in a precarious, agonizing balance, every heartbeat a question mark echoing in the hollow spaces left by the ocean's cold embrace. It was into this fragile, emotionally charged aftermath that Nick Marone arrived at Forrester Creations, his concern a palpable force radiating from him as he sought Brooke out, his eyes scanning her face for signs of the trauma she'd endured, his own relief at her survival mingling with a protective possessiveness that had only intensified with her brush with death. He found her not amidst the usual bustle of the designed floor, but standing by the panoramic windows of her office, gazing out not at the glittering Los Angeles skyline, but seemingly into the depths of her own tumultuous thoughts, her posture carrying a new weight, a vulnerability that hadn't been there before the accident. The usual vibrant energy that animated Brooke Logan was subdued, replaced by a pensive stillness that spoke volumes about the internal reckoning taking place. Nick approached her gently, his voice a low murmur filled with genuine care. "Brooke. God, seeing you go overboard, it was the worst moment of my life. Are you sure you're all right? Really all right?" His touch on her arm was tentative, seeking connection, reassurance not just of her physical well-being, but of their shared path. Brooke turned to him, offering a small, tremulous smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the shadows of the deep water still lingering in their depths. "I'm here, Nick," she said softly, her voice carrying the faint rasp of swallowed seawater and unshed tears. "Thanks to Ridge." The name hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken implications. Nick's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something complex, gratitude warring with a deep-seated jealousy and the sting of knowing Ridge had been the hero in Brooke's darkest moment, crossing his features before he masked it with earnest concern. "Thank God he was there," Nick conceded, the words tasting slightly bitter but necessary. "But Brooke, this," he gestured between them, his intensity building, "what we have, it's real. It's solid. Italy is still waiting for us. A life is waiting." He took a step closer, his gaze locking onto hers with a fervent, almost desperate conviction. "That accident, it scared me more than I can say. It made me realize I can't wait another second, can't risk losing you without you knowing, without you having this." And then, with a movement both deliberate and trembling with raw emotion, Nick reached into his pocket. The world seemed to narrow to the small velvet box in his hand. He opened it slowly, revealing a stunning diamond ring that caught the California sunlight streaming through the window, scattering prismatic sparks across Brooke's stunned face. He lowered himself onto one knee, right there on the plush carpet of her Forrester Creations office, the corporate setting suddenly transformed into the stage for a profoundly personal, life-altering moment. "Brooke Logan," Nick began, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes shining with love and unwavering determination, "this isn't over for us. It can't be. Not after everything. Not after how close I came to losing you forever. I love you. More than I ever thought possible. I love your strength, your passion, your incredible heart. I want to spend every single day showing you that love, building that life we dreamed of in Italy, creating something beautiful and lasting. Please," he implored, holding the ring up like an offering, a promise, a lifeline of a different kind, "will you marry me?" The silence that followed was deafening, thick with the weight of history, near death, reawakened feelings, and this sudden, monumental question hanging in the air. Brooke stared at the ring, then at Nick's earnest, hopeful face, her own expression a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Affection for this good, kind man who had stood by her warmed her. Gratitude for his unwavering devotion flooded her senses. The promise of peace, of a love uncomplicated by the Forrester whirlwind, shimmered enticingly. Yet, superimposed over Nick's pleading eyes was the image of Ridge's face, etched with primal fear and fierce resolve as he fought the waves to reach her, the feel of his arms, solid and familiar, pulling her from the jaws of death, the decades of shared history, love, betrayal, passion, forgiveness, children, grandchildren, that surged back with terrifying force in that life-defining instant. Was the serenity offered by Nick enough to eclipse the profound, undeniable, soul-deep connection she shared with Ridge, a connection violently reaffirmed by the ocean itself? Had her feelings changed? Or had the near-death experience merely stripped away layers of denial, revealing the unvarnished, terrifying truth of her heart's enduring allegiance, an allegiance tragically bound to a man who belonged, at least publicly and by his own recent pledge, to another? The Italy fantasy, once a beacon, now felt like a retreat, a beautiful escape from the messy reality her heart seemed irrevocably tied to. Could she truly ride off into the sunset with Nick, knowing Ridge's love, long dormant or suppressed beneath layers of anger and other commitments, had roared back to life with such ferocity when her life hung in the balance? The ring glittered, demanding an answer, while Brooke's soul felt ripped asunder, suspended between the safe harbor Nick offered and the treacherous, magnetic pull of the forbidden, complicated, yet undeniably profound love she shared with Ridge Forrester. Unbeknownst to Brooke and Nick in that charged moment at Forrester Creations, Ridge himself was grappling with the seismic aftershocks of Brooke's rescue. Saving Brooke hadn't just pulled her from the water, it had plunged him into an emotional maelstrom he'd desperately tried to suppress. Witnessing her vulnerability, her fragility, the sheer terror of nearly losing her forever, had acted like defibrillator paddles on his heart, jolting back to life a love he had convinced himself was manageable, perhaps even fading, safely compartmentalized in the face of his commitment to Taylor Hayes. Taylor represented sanctuary, a relationship built on mutual respect, shared history as co-parents, and a deliberate departure from the chaotic, all-consuming passion that defined Bridge. She was stability, understanding, a calm port after decades of Logan Forrester hurricanes. Yet, pulling Brooke's limp, waterlogged body against his own on that boat deck, feeling the frantic beat of her heart sinking with his own terror-fueled pulse, had shattered that carefully constructed calm. The visceral reality of almost losing her obliterated rationalizations and exposed the raw, unhealed wound beneath the bandage of his engagement. Brooke Logan wasn't just an ex-wife or a complicated co-parent, she was the unfinished symphony of his life, the melody his soul persistently hummed even when he tried to tune it out. This reignited love, however, crashed immediately against the immovable rock of his promise to Taylor. He had asked her to marry him, offered her a future, a ring symbolizing fidelity and a fresh start. How could he now stand before her, the ring she proudly wore gleaming on her finger, and confess that saving Brooke had unearthed feelings that threatened to engulf his carefully planned future? The burden of this impossible conflict was etched deeply onto Ridge's face later that week as he sat with Taylor, recounting the events in Italy, his voice carefully modulated but unable to completely mask the underlying tremor when describing Brooke's accident and rescue. He spoke of the shock, the relief, the gratitude that Nick was unharmed, but the subtext, the unspoken intensity surrounding his role, hung heavy in the air. When the conversation inevitably drifted towards Brooke's current state and her future, Taylor, perceptive and possessing a quiet strength born of her own complex history with both Ridge and Brooke, listened intently. Her eyes, wise and perhaps already sensing the shift in the tectonic plates beneath their relationship, met Ridge's with a knowing clarity that was both compassionate and resolute. "Ridge," Taylor said, her voice calm but firm, cutting through his carefully chosen words, "Brooke's future, it's a path she must walk. But that path," she paused, emphasizing the next words with gentle finality, "it doesn't include you." There was no malice in her statement, only a profound understanding of the destructive patterns, the history of pain, and her own hard-won place in Ridge's life. She saw the turmoil in his eyes, the guilt warring with rekindled passion, and she understood the dangerous allure Brooke represented, especially now, amplified by heroism and mortality. To underscore her point, to anchor Ridge, and perhaps herself, in the reality of their commitment, Taylor lifted her hand, the engagement ring catching the light just as Nick's had in Brooke's office, a silent, powerful declaration. "I meant my vows to you, Ridge," Taylor continued, her gaze unwavering, her voice gaining a steely edge beneath its usual warmth. "I meant my promise. And I'm not," she stated with quiet, unshakable conviction, her fingers subtly touching the band on her finger, "taking off my ring." Her words were a fortress wall, a boundary drawn not in anger, but in self-preservation and the defense of the future they had chosen. Ridge looked at her, at the ring, at the life they'd built together away from the Brooke-centric storms, and felt the crushing weight of his own choices. Taylor's declaration wasn't just a statement of fact, it was a gauntlet thrown down, forcing him to confront the agonizing choice between the reawakened tempest of his past with Brooke and the calmer, committed future he had pledged to Taylor, a choice made infinitely more complex by Brooke's near drowning, her own emotional upheaval, and now, the stunning complication of Nick Marone's heartfelt, desperate proposal shining under the Forrester lights, awaiting an answer that seemed impossible to give. The tides of fate, triggered by a fall overboard, were now crashing against the shores of 4 lives, threatening to sweep away carefully laid plans in the relentless surge of unresolved love, guilt, devotion, and the terrifying, illuminating clarity of near death. Nick Marone, clutching a small velvet ring box like a lifeline, stages his impulsive proposal ambush at Forrester Creations. This moment, crystallized in the weekly preview by Brooke Logan's jaw dropping to the floor, is far more than a simple romantic gesture. It's a volatile cocktail of survivor's guilt, opportunistic longing, and a fundamental misreading of the seismic shifts within Brooke's psyche following her near-death experience and Ridge Forrester's heroic rescue. Nick, the seaman whose initial proposal plan aboard his boat literally sank alongside their vessel, arrives not with calm certainty, but with the frantic energy of a man trying to anchor himself to a reality he fears is slipping away. His belief that Brooke's brush with mortality changes things for them, mistaking shared trauma for a foundation of enduring love, reveals a profound misunderstanding of Brooke's character and a complex web of relationships now irrevocably altered. Brooke's shock isn't merely surprise at the proposal's timing or location, it's the visceral recoil of a woman confronting a profound disconnect. She has just stared into the abyss, felt the terrifying fragility of life, and been pulled back by the man who, despite their painful history and recent estrangement, remains the deep, complicated love of her life. Nick's proposition, while perhaps stemming from genuine affection and relief at her survival, feels jarringly incongruous with the emotional catharsis she's undergoing. It bypasses the necessary processing of her trauma and the overwhelming significance of Ridge's rescue, attempting to leapfrog directly into a commitment Brooke knows, with a clarity born of near-death and decades of romantic tumult, would be fundamentally unfair. To accept Nick now would be to use him as a salve for her raw nerves, a distraction from the unresolved, tempestuous feelings Ridge's actions have violently resurfaced. It would be leading him on, betraying whatever genuine affection exists between them, and, crucially, betraying the profound, unresolved truth of her own heart that her ordeal has laid bare. Nick sees the aftermath of the storm as a clean slate for them. Brooke experiences it as a floodlight illuminating the enduring, albeit fractured, landscape of her love for Ridge. Simultaneously, the reverberations of Brooke's rescue and survival send shockwaves through the tentative peace of Ridge. Ridge, burdened by the gravity of his actions in Italy, saving the woman he both loves and has been deeply hurt by, attempts a fraught conversation with Taylor Hayes. His head hangs low, a picture of weary defeat, as he tries to articulate the what happened in Italy, implicitly suggesting that the events have irrevocably altered the dynamics, perhaps forcing a reckoning with his own feelings. Taylor's response, however, is a masterclass in controlled resistance veiled as compassion. She may utter the words, "Glad Brooke is okay," a necessary social nicety, but her subsequent actions and declarations are a fortress being reinforced. Her refusal to remove her engagement ring is a silent, potent symbol, a claim staked, a boundary drawn. Her assertion that there is a future for Brooke, it's just not with Ridge, is less a statement of well-wishing and more a strategic pronouncement, a desperate incantation spoken to solidify her own desired reality. Taylor hears Ridge's implication, that saving Brooke changed something fundamental, and categorically rejects it. She interprets his turmoil not as a resurgence of love for Brooke, but as residual guilt or obligation, something separate from the future she has meticulously built and envisioned with him. Her stance is defensive, born from a deep-seated fear that Brooke's near demise has somehow rewritten Ridge's priorities, pulling him back into her powerful orbit. Taylor clings to her ring and her narrative, that Brooke's future lies elsewhere, precisely because she senses the potential for her own hard-won happiness with Ridge to unravel. She represents the counterpoint to Nick's impulsive leap, where Nick sees opportunity in vulnerability, Taylor perceives a threat to her stability and responds with rigid control. The proposal ambush, therefore, isn't an isolated romantic blunder, it's a pivotal nexus point exposing the raw nerve endings of multiple characters navigating the treacherous aftermath of trauma. Nick's gesture, though bold, is tragically misplaced, mistaking Brooke's post-traumatic vulnerability and the shared intensity of survival for a readiness to commit to him. It highlights his role as the well-intentioned but ultimately incompatible suitor, whose timing and understanding are catastrophically off-kilter. Brooke's stunned reaction foreshadows the inevitable gentle but firm rejection, a necessary act of integrity towards both Nick and herself, acknowledging that gratitude and shared peril are no substitutes for the deep, albeit tumultuous, love that still binds her to Ridge. Her near-death experience hasn't opened a door for Nick, it's violently reopened the door to her unresolved history with Ridge, forcing both of them to confront feelings buried but never extinguished. Meanwhile, Taylor's defiant stance across town underscores the immense personal stakes beyond Brooke and Ridge. Her refusal to acknowledge any shift, her desperate grip on her engagement ring, speaks volumes about her terror that the fragile equilibrium of her life with Ridge is under siege. Ridge, caught in the maelstrom, hangs his head, a symbol of the crushing weight of responsibility, guilt, resurgent love, and the painful awareness that his actions have simultaneously saved one woman and potentially shattered the peace of another. The juxtaposition of Nick's hopeful ambush and Taylor's fearful defense is stark. One man misreads trauma as a new beginning, while one woman misreads rescue as an ending to her.